Talking again today with a longtime former AP newsman, Bryant Thomas. Bryant, Michael Bloomberg is now threatening, perhaps, is what some of the critics would say, threatening to enter the melee, the free-for-all in the race for the nomination among the Democrats for the presidential election. Long shot or somewhat of a possibility?
Well, he's still a long shot at this point, but it's possible he could cobble together enough support to make him a force on the states that he's going to participate in. He's already said he's not going to bother with the first 4 states. 2 have primaries, 2 have caucuses. So let's see how he does on Super Tuesday, which is right after the Nevada caucuses on at the end of February.
But his deciding not to participate in Iowa and New Hampshire, some other early primary states, won't that alone give him some negatives going into it? Because the Democratic chairmen of Iowa and New Hampshire are already complaining, their states are being ignored, and it's not good for a candidate is better off starting to get into the nitty gritty right from the beginning. It serves the public better too. So won't that be kind of a negative for him going into Super Tuesday?
Well, yes and no. The states that vote before Super Tuesday don't represent a large percentage of delegates.
Right.
So ignoring them really doesn't cost anybody very much. He has to do well on Super Tuesday to be a viable candidate. I mean, there's a lot of 16 states are holding primaries that day. Except for his own in New York, which comes later. So that's the prize, and I think that's what he's focusing on.
Well, his strategy is mass advertising in those key states that would put him over with the Electoral College. Mass advertising, and I guess a lot of people on the ground, he has unlimited funds. But considering the requirements now of a candidate to be telegenic, to be colorful, to connect with the people, to speak plainly as Trump has done, can a guy like him who is so analytical and reserved, and some people say dull, can he really make it?
Good question. If you put him onside Trump on the same stage, Trump may eat his tail. I mean, I think that they're going to have to toughen him up if he emerges as the candidate to go after Trump. And likewise, some of the moderators are going to have to stop Trump from engaging in the types of antics that he did when he was on stage with Hillary, prancing around in the back, rolling his eyes, waving his arms, all the other annoying things he did during those debates. And that sort of stuff has no place on the debate stage. And somebody's going to have to say, sit down and be quiet, let the other person talk, and then you can have your turn.
If they do, and if they can control him, even if they tell him that. Trump has already given him a nickname, Little Michael. So, he's already started with a personal attack, the diminishment of anybody who challenges him. But even those delegate-rich states, now California is a super prize, Texas along with it. They have Democrats, sure, but a lot of those Democrats are some of the younger groups, more progressive groups, more radical groups, political identity groups that will not necessarily vote for a rich billionaire from New York, don't you think?
Well, that's very true. The only question will be whether he has a campaign that resonates. The only question will be whether he has a campaign that resonates.
How would he make it resonate? What could he say? What could he do?
Well, he's got to get his message out there on media, first of all, by spending money on advertising, and then making himself available on the ground. You've got to have a ground game in these states to make this work. And if the candidate is not there to interact with people, put their hands on their shoulders, shake their hands, walk with them at certain events, eat their food, all the things that politicians do in these types of campaigns, then he's going to falter.
All right, you said he's got to get his message out. What would that message be that would so engage the public to put him over the top?
Well, if I were Michael Bloomberg, I would say, look, there's nobody among the candidates here who's a slam dunk winner. We have three candidates, maybe four, who are very close together. And I think I can jump in here and fill the void, come up with somebody that a lot of Democrats are privately saying they would like to see. Whether he's the person is another issue. We talked about this when Hillary Clinton was making noise a few weeks back. If indeed Democrats are yearning for some other candidate to take them into battle next year, I doubt that it's going to be Hillary Clinton. I mean, she's not going to have support that is going to be any better in the negative category than she did in 2016. She's still going to have negatives in the 40s, and that's no place to begin a campaign.
Well, you know, it's said that both Warren and Sanders are not mainstream enough for the bulk of Democratic voters nationally. Biden is more centrist, but he has a lot of baggage. Now, so then would Bloomberg be presenting himself as the reasonable alternative centrist?
Well, that's, I'm sure, what he'd like to have people believe. Whether it works is another issue.
What about his record as New York City mayor for 3 terms? Definitely a plus or a mixed bag?
Mixed bag. I think, you know, a lot of it is not going to play beyond the borders of New York City. This stop and frisk thing, and we talked about this before, is an issue for minorities in New York City, but it certainly isn't an issue in Iowa and in New Hampshire and places like that. It can become an issue in South Carolina with heavy black voter participation, and perhaps in Nevada. But we'll see. You know, if he doesn't do well on Super Tuesday, which is his whole claim to fame here, then, you know, he's in the political scrap heap.
Yeah, the stop and frisk policy was instrumental, I guess, in bringing down the crime rate to its lowest level in New York City. Now, Giuliani started on that path, and then Bloomberg proceeded with it, continued with it. So yeah, that a lot of people who were sick and tired of the crime in New York, how bad the streets looked, the whole atmosphere, they would praise him for that. But again, among minority voters, they're not all going to be ready to say that was a great policy. So, and you know, with the weight of the minority vote across the country, that could be a big problem for Bloomberg, no?
True. And we'll have to see how that plays with voters in Super Tuesday states with heavy minority populations. California, Texas, all those places that potentially could be a train wreck for the Bloomberg campaign.
States which he desperately would need to get over the top.
Exactly.
All right, speaking of that, a lot of people are saying already that Bloomberg is just going to split even more the Democratic vote among all these Democratic candidates. If that happens, there's a good chance, I would think, of the Democrats going into the convention with no candidate having enough delegates to put them over. Now, what happens then? The super delegates could come in again, but in a different way than they did in 2016, correct?
Yeah, they can't vote on the first ballot unless somebody does not come up with 50% of the vote, which would be the majority. So, you know, I think that, you know, when the voting is all done, the delegates are probably going to be enough for one clear candidate to emerge as the victor with more than 50% of the vote. No matter who it is.
Going into the convention, you believe that that's the most probable?
I think so. I think so.
Now, just to explain to our listeners, the difference now between the superdelegates in 2020 and in 2016, the big difference is that in 2016, they went into the convention already pledged.
Correct.
Which gave Hillary, according to critics, an unfair advantage.
That's right. And the Democrats wanted to make sure they didn't have that situation come along again, even though Hillary's not going to be the candidate this time, most likely. That they didn't have this cry of it's a stacked deck to deal with again.
And it was a stacked deck because most of those delegates pledged to Hillary. It was arranged that way by the party leaders, was it not, ahead of time?
Well, sure, and that's why the new party leaders, Tom Perez and Keith Ellison, decided to do something about this, and they did. They didn't get rid of the superdelegates altogether, as we thought earlier, but they did diminish their role in the process that precedes the actual elections in the primary states.
So what happens this year is the superdelegates, although they'll be there, they can't vote on the first ballot.
Correct.
It's only if nobody emerges with a plurality, then their votes would be counted.
And they can change their votes anytime they want. They don't have to stick with one candidate on one vote if there's no prevalent winner. They don't have to stay with that candidate. They can move to someone else. So that's different too.
But would it kind of be a replay of 2016 in that if they do get to vote on the second ballot, since they're selected pretty much by party leaders in the party hierarchy, wouldn't they tend to be Biden supporters?
Maybe, maybe not. We don't know who the superdelegates are at this point in terms of their pledges. We know who they are, but we don't know who they're pledged to, privately or publicly. Mm-hmm. So it makes it very difficult for someone to say, "Oh, you're a stooge for this party," or "You're going to vote against me because you don't like me." We don't know that.
They're not pledged ahead of time, are they? Or are they?
If they are, they're not saying publicly.
Yeah. So for all we know, they could all be stacked for one party. But you're saying it's not as likely this time as it was in 2016 because the party leadership has changed, more diverse.
Correct. You've got to keep in mind that Tom Perez and Ellison have both done a very good job in ground gaming the Democratic House that we now have. Everybody said, "Oh, no, you're never going to do that well." Well, they flipped 40 seats, and they flipped seats even in states like California's Orange County, which hasn't ever had a Democratic congressperson. So ground game is everything. And if the candidates with the better ground games prevail, then Biden's got a very good chance because his ground game is pretty good.
But also Bloomberg with unlimited funds, and also he knows how to he hires the best people and uses them effectively, so that could work for him too.
Absolutely. This could be an entree for Bloomberg to become president. I don't know. I want to see what happens with the first two primaries in New Hampshire and South Carolina, and the first two caucuses in Iowa and Nevada. And then you can take a look at where the numbers are, and that'll give you a flavor for what's going to happen on March 3rd on Super Tuesday.
So just wrapping it up now, you would say then that at this point there are too many wild cards out there to really figure that one candidate is much more likely than another to emerge as the nominee. It's still wide open.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think the polling shows that. Keep your eye on the Bloomberg 4%. If Bloomberg can come up with national polling that shows some sort of movement, if you can move it up to 8% by the end of the year, for instance, that shows that he might be a viable candidate. If he's stuck at 4 or even less, then that's problematic.
Bryant Thomas, former longtime AP newsman out of the Washington, D.C. Bureau, thanks once again for being with us.
You bet.